Good evening and welcome back to Canadian Football Fanatics, and thanks everybody for tuning in to week number 7 of the Canada West Football Show. Matt Young will be joining me in a matter of moments to talk about all things Canada West football once again. Back after the Thanksgiving bye week. Once again, if I missed anybody on the weekly show last night, hopefully everyone was able to have a good week off, enjoy their Thanksgiving. But the Canada West is back before playoff time starts here in a matter of weeks. We have some big games to discuss. Obviously, we weren't able to recap week number 6, so we'll quickly give a little, maybe a 3-minute drill. Weekly show. We'll kind of quasi it into the weekly or the Canada West Football Show here tonight of just recapping last week's action, and then we'll go through kind of the playoff race here in the Canada West. All 6 teams still alive in the race here down the stretch. 2 weeks remaining here in the regular season before playoff time starts, and it's going to be an interesting one. If the end of the season is anything like the start of the year, we are in store for a very wild finish and a very chaotic finish to the Canada West football season in 2024. And then who knows what's in store come playoff time. So that is a perfect opportunity to welcome in our guest. Joining me as always, Matt Young from CTV. Matt, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Hey man, I'm doing good. Good to be here with you. And we're kind of, we're in basically the meat of the schedule right here. The Thanksgiving weekend's passed. Everybody's all full of turkey dinner, which I certainly was. So that was a good time. But yeah, now we got the final 2 weeks of the season here, and this is all about jockeying for position. We'll see who makes it into the playoffs. We're going to see who's not getting into the playoffs and who's going to host a playoff game. So these next 2 weeks are fun because weather's getting a little chillier. It's going to be nice this weekend, but the football weather's here. The leaves are changing color, and I'm excited. Let's get ready to rock.
I was going to wish you a happy belated Thanksgiving. I also wanted to wish you a happy belated birthday. I believe
Oh,
yesterday was your
thank you.
birthday, Matt. So
There
hopefully
you
you're able
go.
to enjoy your birthday and had a good night out and all that stuff. So it's back
Thanks.
to business, Matt. We took the week off last week. I wasn't feeling too good, and then with the bye week, so football back on our schedule, but I think quickly we just give our thoughts quickly on some of the games. Very quickly recap of last week's action, but maybe start with the game that you called with the Calgary Dinos winning by 3 points, 23-20 over the Regina Rams. You were able to call it. What were just maybe some of your Coles notes, if you will, I guess, on last week's game or 2 weeks ago, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah, well, okay, so you had Calgary defeating the Regina Rams, and it was a bit of a weird game because I don't know if you saw it, but the winds there were hovering around 80, 90 kilometers an hour. They actually, some of the flags that were on posts outside the stadium actually literally flew off. So that was a weird game. It was tough to pass. It was you were chancing it if you were going to try and kick a field goal. Surprisingly, I'm surprised that amount of points were actually even put on the board to begin with how bad the winds were out there. It was a very, very difficult for the quarterbacks to hit wide receivers and hit anybody on a long route. Although Luke Gutek made a great catch for the Calgary Dinos downfield on one play, and that brought him closer to the end zone. But it was largely, I would say, it's mostly a defensive battle. A lot of running. You saw a lot of Matthew Clark. You saw a lot of Marshall Erickson with a little bit of Christian Katende for the Regina Rams there. Overall, it was a good game to watch. I just don't know if it's the barometer because of the conditions, right? Now, mind you, we're headed obviously into winter, so things are going to get a little cool. You could see some windy ones out there, but yeah, I think that game went the way of the Calgary Dinos because of their defense. Their defense was able to stop the Regina Rams in a number of situations. There were a couple of times when there were some third down gambles where defenses put up a wall there. And ultimately, I think the Regina Rams, because of the wind and because of the conditions, maybe weren't able to use all their weapons. That's not necessarily a rub against Calgary. They played a very good game. They have a very good team, and they can beat anybody. And they've beaten some good teams so far this season. So it was a close one. Came down to the wire. The Rams actually had a chance to possibly try and kick a tying field goal at the end, but just kind of ran out of time. They were downfield, but because of the wind, a 45 yarder was very, very difficult. They had to get down closer. Obviously, ran out of time, couldn't quite do it. So, I mean, obviously, hats off to the Calgary Dinos. They won. They kind of kept themselves alive, defeating the Regina Rams in that game. And now that sets up a pretty interesting final 2 weeks in Canada West.
Yeah, the weather, as you mentioned, played a big part, I think, in that. With the, I believe the Regina Rams had the ball with, I think, 7 seconds to go. They end up running the ball to try to get a little bit closer and end up getting tackled with time expiring. And it was unfortunate for them. I think if the wind wasn't such a factor, who knows if they were able to maybe trot out their field goal unit and maybe able to attempt to tie and send it into overtime. So let's move on to undefeated, no more. The Manitoba Bisons fall 42-24 to the University of Saskatchewan, once again led by a familiar face, Riker Frank. But what were your thoughts dating back to that game a few weeks ago now?
Well, that game was really all about the Huskies, and they kind of dominated right from the start. That Huskies defense did not allow Jackson Tuszynski or the Manitoba Bison's running backs or receiving core to really do anything. And Manitoba obviously committed some costly turnovers, some interceptions, and it was a very rough night for Jackson Tuszynski, who I think is very good. I'm really high on him. I think number 14 can do a lot of damage, especially with his understanding in the pocket and awarenessness. He knows how to get outside of the pocket when he needs to, and he can use his legs. But that was, I would have to say, a masterful scheme by Scott Flory and company. To really limit anything that Manitoba could do. And it wasn't really till the fourth quarter, when the game was almost essentially in hand, that Manitoba was finally able to try and move the ball and put some points on the board. And hats off to the Saskatchewan Huskies offense, especially Daniel Wiebe, and you mentioned Riker Frank. Jesse Kuntz, I think, had 4 or 5 catches in that game. So number 17 has really come along. And that Husky team, they are surging. They have found their stride, you would say, just at the right time. They're coming back. A couple of guys are coming back from some injuries, or might be coming back from some injuries this week, so they're well rested. And that Saskatchewan Huskies team has proven that they're right back in it and have a chance at a home playoff game. They have to have some other teams win and lose for them. But that Huskies team, that was a really dominant performance. And I was a bit surprised by that because I thought that Manitoba, coming in at 5-0, had played good football for the most part. They were in some close games, but they managed to pull out victories. That was a statement game from the Saskatchewan Huskies, and we'll see if they're able to repeat that performance against the Regina Rams this week.
Yeah, as you kind of alluded to there, I wasn't necessarily surprised that the Saskatchewan Huskies jumped out to an early lead there, although they did look pretty impressive and jumped really all over Manitoba. Manitoba's, I think, started a little bit slow in a few games this year and kind of played the comeback kid, if you will, here in some of these games. So it was, I think, more surprising that they didn't really get themselves off the mat really at all that game and fight back. I know it was pretty interesting to see, going back to look at the box scores after the game. Wasn't able to watch a majority of this game, but Jackson Tuszynski, I think he had, I don't think he threw for a touchdown pass, had 2 interceptions, had I think just over 200 yards passing. He also had just under 100 yards rushing. So I think that Huskies defense did a good job of taking his reads away and really making him, a threat with his legs, but not really making him, a scoring threat with his legs, and kind of limiting him that way and doing a really good job of containing that Manitoba Bison's offense that can hurt you in many ways. Braden Stubbs, another just under 100-yard game as well, but nothing that really hurt them as far as some bigger type plays and stuff like that. So it was an impressive statement type win, as you mentioned, on behalf of the Saskatchewan Huskies. So lastly was the UBC Thunderbirds taking out the University of Alberta Golden Bears without QB1, without Eli Hetlinger going into the game. What were your thoughts going back to this one, Matt?
Well, this one here, the Alberta Golden Bears, they had some chances in this game. I mean, it was very, very close. They got an interception and stopped a BC drive and had a chance to try and come back and put some points on the board. But BC UBC, always managed to come back, and they had some big plays in this game, including a really strange pass that actually it looked like it was intercepted, and then the ball kind of fell into the hands of Shamar McBean. And I think that's kind of the season that it's been for the Alberta Golden Bears. They just haven't had any bounces go their way so far this year, because that's a very, very good team out in Alberta. It's just been tough for them so far this season. But you know what? The UBC Thunderbirds and the Saskatchewan Huskies, they're both teams that say surge to me. They're both teams that UBC started off at 0-2, then they started coming back and winning, and now they're playing pretty assertive football right now. Garrett Ricker throwing for 370 yards. He had one interception, but other than that, a pretty clean game. And he's also proving how far he can throw the ball, especially on the run, which is very, very impressive. So I think that UBC squad is now firing on all cylinders, and look out, they're coming. And you would have thought, with Manitoba starting at 5-0 and UBC at one point was 0-2, well, how could UBC come back? Well, they're in a point where they could overtake Manitoba. That last week of the season is going to be really, really interesting when those two teams play. It's going to be a lot decided there. But that UBC has come back and done really, really well. And that's a hot football team that I wouldn't want to play right now. On the other side, Alberta's a very good team. They just really haven't had a whole lot go their way this season. I believe Eli Hittlinger is very good. Obviously, battling some injuries and things like that. And, Caleb Breck steps in there and 16 for 30, one pick, 234 yards, not bad, but just unable to overcome that UBC defense. And I think for the Alberta Golden Bears, it could be a bit of a tough road to hoe for the next little while. But those UBC Thunderbirds, they're looking good. Isaiah Knight and Dane Kapler and everybody out there, they're just executing in their defense too. So that's a good UBC team. They're rocking right now. And hey, look, this is when you want to get hot, right? Last 2 weeks of the season, heading into the playoffs, you rest up some guys, and that's where UBC is right now.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. Getting hot at the right time, I think, is very important. It seemed like the sky was falling in, the youth sports community with, UBC defending, obviously representing the Canada West and go Bills. I love the Bills Cup there, Matt. Not a boy.
I had to make sure I put that in there.
I had to sneak that in with the big W on Monday night. It's been a bad couple of weeks, and we had corrected that with a nice win on Monday night. But to kind of talk about the UBC, or to get back on the UBC Thunderbirds, started 0-2. The U Sports football community is kind of wondering, like, is the loss of these two offensive linemen that big? With a lot of guys coming back, right? And especially on offense, on defense, a lot of familiar faces, and I think they've really figured kind of their own identity out here in the last 6 or 7 weeks here, the regular season, and are going into the playoffs here pretty hot, as you mentioned. A big time matchup next week versus Manitoba, and I think it's kind of where we'll talk a little bit tonight. With kind of a quicker recap of just maybe going through each of the 6 teams, with all 6 teams having their playoff hopes still alive and well. And if the last 2 weeks are anything like the previous 6 weeks, we are in store for a very big treat, especially with some of those matchups next week. Some of those previous games of the matchups coming up were very close games. I think some of these games next week could go either way, even this week as well, to make things even more intriguing next week. But Matt, if we maybe want to start at the bottom and work our way up, I'm just curious on kind of your thoughts on some of these teams. And we'll start with the Regina Rams, who obviously kind of started the season off on surprising a lot of people coming into the year, and have kind of, I think, maybe come back down to earth. I don't know if that's maybe the right way to put it because of how good the conference is as a whole. But what's I guess kind of what would you say about their success they've had this season, and then your confidence level and maybe their opportunity here to make a playoff run here?
Well, of course, the Regina Rams have dealt with a fair share of adversity themselves, right? So they had Owen Sieben starting at quarterback in the regular season. He gets injured. So Noah Pelche comes in. He does a pretty good job. And the Rams, Noah Pelche's led them to the playoffs before. So it's not that Noah Pelche doesn't have a lot of experience or that he's coming raw off the bench and hasn't played before. People remember a couple of years ago, as a rookie, he got the Regina Rams into the playoffs. So Noah Pelche is absolutely a great quarterback. They got some great pieces there with, as I mentioned, Marshall Erickson and Deshaun Mims on offense. They got the Sombacks on defense. They got Cameron Ma, guys like that. I mean, that's a good team in Regina. Mark McConkey has expressed some disappointment in the turnovers. I mean, there's been a couple of times this season where they're playing. I think back to the UBC game. You fumbled the ball twice in the fourth quarter in a close game, and that's one that I think kind of slipped away from the Regina Rams. They had an opportunity to put some points on the board. Again, similar to other games this season. season where we've seen teams that have a chance and, a fumble or an interception late in the game hurts you. That's something that's hurt the Regina Rams a little bit. They played that game against Calgary in 80-kilometer-an-hour winds. And like I say, they get down to the 45-yard line. Normally that's maybe a shot at a field goal late in the game, but they couldn't do it. They had to get closer and ran out of time. So I think Regina, it's they've had some bad bounces. They've had some untimely turnovers, things like penalties and stuff like that have hurt the Regina Rams, and that's a 2-4 team that through a couple of close games could easily be 4-2. So what's interesting is the last place team still has 2 wins and could easily still leap into the 3 spot or maybe the 4 spot. Don't think that they could get a home playoff game. It might be pretty tough at this point because of that loss to UBC. But look, that's a Regina team. That's a good team. And I think, gosh, every team's better than their record shows, I think, in Canada West this year. But, that's how I look at sort of their performance so far. And they're gonna give the Huskies all they can handle this week.
Yeah, I would take a lot of promise going into the future as well of this core hopefully sticking together here. Some of these guys you're going to lose, I think, Jackson and I think Delaney, a few of these guys that maybe get CFL opportunities, but a good majority of these guys, I think Owen Seaman will be able to come back, hopefully fully healthy next year and be able to build on this kind of core group. And I think they're going to be competitive and get their best shot here maybe in the future, next few years of this Regina Rams team. So let's start moving up the ladder with the Calgary Dinos football program, who have been an interesting team, led obviously by their defense all year long. Don Britton has had obviously his moments as well as that offense, but what are your thoughts on Calgary and them still being, right in the playoff thick of things?
Well, they still right are in the thick of it. And that's a good team out there in Alberta as well, out in Calgary. And Ryan Sheehan's doing a pretty good job with the Calgary team that, you're right, has flexed its muscle, certainly on defense so far this season. You think about guys like Boscheman and Taylor Young and Ball, I think, should be back this week. So that's a good team out there in Calgary. And then they got the Matthew Clark show. And when the Matthew Clark show gets rolling, people start paying attention, right? And he can run and move the ball. And what impresses me a lot about Matthew Clark is the way he can, through those really tight spaces, can find some wiggle room and get through and get some of those yards that maybe you think things are closing up and number 2 squeezes right through. So that's a good team out there in Calgary. Again, a 2-4 team that, if it weren't for a couple of close games, could probably be 4-2, right? So it's a pretty competitive conference this year in Canada West. And like I say, them and the Regina Rams, like nobody's out of it. Nobody's out of it. A lot of times, at least you have one team that's probably done. There's nobody that's out of it this year. Anybody can still climb back into that playoff race and win some games. So that's what makes these last 2 weeks really, really going to be fun to watch. And Calgary's right in the thick of it, and we'll see what they can do this weekend.
Yes, indeed. So let's stay in Alberta, and that is with the Alberta Golden Bears. And I think this is a team that is much better than their 2-4 record shows. Obviously, a team that represented in the Canada West Hardy Cup matchup last year was taking UBC to the brink and brought a lot of guys back and had started the season off pretty good, and I think off to their regular form, and have kind of stalled out a little bit here in the thick of the season here. And led by Matthew Peterson, obviously, but I think it's been a maybe a step back for Eli Hetlinger this season as far as his performance last year, leading them to a Hardy Cup. This year, I think, hasn't been as good. But what are your thoughts on in Alberta? Kind of because they've been given some tough situations in some of these closer games as well, coming out on the wrong end of things. They could very easily, like you mentioned with the Regina Rams and Calgary Dinos, they could easily be a 4-2 ball club as well. So what are your thoughts on Alberta and their hopes kind of going here down the stretch?
Yeah, a little bit like like the Regina Rams going through some adversity right now. Now you lose Eli Hetlinger for a huge game a couple of weeks ago against UBC, and they put up a good fight. And again, had some opportunities, really just couldn't capitalize. A close game when you get reception or if you stop a team, let's say on downs or something like that, you got to be able to come back and get some points. And Alberta wasn't able to do that. That Alberta Golden Bears team, I think, again, better than their record shows. I know a lot of people thought that they would be right back in the mix for the Hardy Cup, and the thing is with the standings, the way they are right now, they actually still are. I mean, this Alberta team can still obviously get in the playoffs. In fact, right now they hold that fourth and final playoff spot in the Canada West picture. So and don't sleep on them. If Eli Hetlinger does come back in the playoffs and Matthew Peterson gets going, but that's a team that again has just had some they've had some bad bounces. They've dealt with some injuries and sometimes, like I say, it's too many turnovers, maybe some untimely penalties that hurt you, and a combination of playing some other teams that have just really surged, like the Huskies and the UBC Thunderbirds. Like when you think about their last two games are against probably the hottest teams in Canada West right now, Saskatchewan and UBC. So they're a team that I still believe can do some damage in the playoffs. If they're healthy and they limit the mistakes. And but they got a big one this weekend coming up. And it'll be interesting to see what they can do against the Manitoba Bisons.
Yes, indeed. So the Saskatchewan Huskies, who have come on of late and been led by Anton Amrud, I think has had himself a fine season. Has cleaned up the turnovers a little bit better than last season. But Riker Frank and Daniel Weave have been the tip of the spear offensively all season long, because they've been even compared to the entire country, have racked up a lot of good yards, a lot of good production for their team defensively. Some new faces with guys like Nick, is it Nick Weeb leaving last year, and some of those other veteran guys that were on the roster. Some guys stepping up though, and they are 3-3 now with an opportunity here down the stretch to win a few games, get to a 5-win team, and make some noise because they're still have a lot of good veterans on that roster, and some of those third and fourth, fifth year guys that are been around now for a few years on that Saskatchewan Huskies team and know the standard of competing for Hardy Cups. And I think they're going to be a dangerous team come playoff time. It's a matter of are they going to be able to host a game, or are they going to be going on the road for that first round of playoffs? So what are your thoughts on the Saskatchewan Huskies here closing in the playoffs?
That's a well-coached squad. I mean, all the U Sports coaches are great coaches. Scott Flory is just a genius, and by the way, a great guy. If you ever have a chance to talk to him off the field, it's just a wonderful football guy and a wonderful person. He does a great job with that program. And you're right, guys have stepped up on both sides of the ball. On defense, you got Seth Hundeby and you got Catley Joseph, and then offensively, Daniel Weeb's having a great season. Obviously, Anton Amundred, who seems to do a little bit better job of making sure that he doesn't put up throws that could be in jeopardy and things like that. So he's done a great job lately. And then you have some other guys that have stepped up too, like Jesse Kuntz, 9 catches in the last 2 games. This is a team that is firing, and they've dealt with some injuries on the defensive line. We'll see if they get some guys back this week. I haven't quite seen the depth chart yet for this week for them, but that's a Huskies team that's on the rise. And look out. I mean, you could, if the math works in the schedule over the last 2 weeks, and the right teams win and the right teams lose. It could be a team coming to Saskatoon for a home playoff game for the Saskatchewan Huskies. We'll see what happens. I'll be in the booth doing color this week with Darren Du by play for their game against the Regina Rams. So and that's always a one. That Prairie Challenge, that's always great, and then they'll draw a big crowd for that. And they're expecting nice weather this weekend in Saskatoon, 18 degrees and sunny. So it's going to be beautiful, and we'll see if they can continue on the upswing here.
Yeah, and last matchup was a classic with Regina winning that one as well early on in the season. So Saskatchewan should be pretty hungry to right that wrong, get a victory in that nice province rivalry. I'm excited actually. You and Darren calling the game, that should make things even more fun. So I'll definitely be tuning in.
Oh, Big D's going to be fun, man. I love that. I love, and I just love being up there. Play-by-play color, to me, it doesn't matter. It's just fun to talk about these guys.
You guys will bring a lot of great energy for sure to the booth, and I'm excited to that'll be a Saturday afternoon. I believe UBC is the Friday night that won this week, correct? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's a Saturday afternooner.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that one. So let's get up to the I think the top 2 teams in the Canada West as of now. Let's start with the UBC Thunderbirds, who are surging going into the playoffs right now. 4-2 on the year. Obviously started off at 0-2, 4 straight wins. Are riding very high. Garrett Rooker is starting to look like himself of last season. As you mentioned, coming off the 370-yard game. Isaiah Knight has been the Isaiah Knight that we have been used to all year long. excuse me, all his entire career. And then some of those guys that are in the receiving core, as you mentioned, McBean kind of making that crazy unorthodox type catch. Sam downtown Davenport. I forget your other nickname for Mr. Davenport, but some of
Sam,
those
the
guys.
reception man.
Yes, Sam, the reception man, Davenport. Um, and some of those guys. The defense had started the year, and I think that was probably some of the biggest questions that were surrounding the UBC Thunderbirds, and they have really come around. That group has, I think, done a lot of good things here the last few weeks. So, what are your thoughts on UBC really on a high going into the playoffs here?
Well, you mentioned the offensive firepower, and you talked about Sam Davenport, and you talked about Garrett Rooker and Isaiah Knight and Dane Kapler and all those guys. But equal tip of the hat should go to the defense because they're absolutely kicking up a storm right now and causing all kinds of problems. They don't forget about that front four. That defense got a couple of sacks against Alberta as well, so they're causing problems for quarterbacks on the other side. So you can't ignore that for sure. I think that UBC team, it took a while to find their stride, but now Garrett Rooker seems to be in a groove. And same with some of the other guys we mentioned. And Blake Nill has obviously cleaned up some of the mistakes that they saw earlier on in the first 2 weeks of the season. They've won 4 straight, and they're facing a Manitoba team that was just handed, or there is a Manitoba team at the top that was just handed their first loss. So now UBC, first place is in sight. And it's rare that you start off 0-2 in Canada West. You only play 8 games, and you can still come back and rocket up the standings and win the division. But UBC has a chance to do that. And if they stay healthy and play good football and limit turnovers, they're absolutely going to probably, they're going to at least host a home playoff game, I think, and possibly be in first place when it's all said and done and be back to the Hardy Cup. So I've said it before right here earlier on today. It's the UBC Thunderbirds and the Saskatchewan Huskies. Those are the 2 hottest teams right now in Canada West, and they're moving. And the UBC Thunderbirds are raring to go. And they got a big game this weekend. And by the way, the UBC Thunderbirds, they're at home this weekend against Calgary. So they're facing a Dinos team that's pretty good, coming off a big win against Regina. They're going to be high and confident. But that UBC team is looking good in pretty much all facets of the game right now.
Yes, they are. My good co-host and a good partner asked, who does UBC have next week? They have the Manitoba Bisons in a showdown.
Oh, yeah.
That should be for first place if things are keeping.
Like if Manitoba loses this week and UBC wins, that game essentially could be for first place on the last week of the season. We'll see what happens. But UBC playing the Manitoba Bisons, I don't think you could have a better ending than that to the schedule this year in a wacky season in Canada West. And so that's going to be interesting.
I think, it's hard to argue who it's maybe more important for in terms of having home field advantage throughout the Canada West playoffs. You could surely argue that for the Prairie teams, it's super important. But I think you could also use that argument kind of against them as far as UBC of how important it would be to, as we saw last year, kind of avoid some of those elements of having to go to the Prairies and have teams come out west where, weather is going to be much, much better. You might have, a rainstorm or something like that, but it's not going to be, as we saw in Regina there a few weeks ago, crazy howling winds, very much, much colder. And I think if UBC is able to do that, I think we'll be a big time help in helping them get back to that Hardy Cup and hopefully maybe winning it once again. So it's going to be interesting to see here down the stretch, especially with them playing here next week. But Matt, let's get to the Manitoba Bisons quickly before we get to this week's matchups. The Manitoba Bisons fell for the first time this season. I think that is could be maybe a blessing in disguise. I think with having that one loss and getting out of the way, I think it's probably been heard throughout that locker room now with the Brian Dobie farewell tour. I think it's been kind of dubbed of the whispers of maybe wanting to go undefeated. Now that you have that loss out of the way, I think you can really start to set your sights in on rounding back into form before playoff time. A big time matchup versus UBC next week and getting back on track. I'm not too worried about the Manitoba Bisons. I think that is throughout a 16, 17 game regular season, you're going to have a stinker or two. I think throughout an 8-game regular season in Canada West, you're going to have a stinker or two. That's, I think, just one that Manitoba can flush take the bye week and hopefully reset and then come back a nice rejuvenated team. And this week, I think they'll be able to do that with an Alberta team who's kind of going the opposite direction of kind of everybody else in the conference right now. So, what are your thoughts on Manitoba here and their last few weeks here before playoffs?
Well, I mean, the bye week could not come at a better time for the Manitoba Bisons. I mean, that was a physical game against the Saskatchewan Huskies. And by the way, Jackson Tashinsky put it all on the line. He is a warrior out there. He was not afraid to take hits. He took a bunch of licks in that game, and no doubt. In fact, I actually had a chance to see him after the game, and I just gave him a quick compliment. And I said, "Man, you really put it out on the line tonight," and he did. So the bye week does not come at a better time for the Manitoba Bisons. And sometimes when you suffer your first loss, it's good because you learn some things. It sort of takes away maybe any sort of I want to say arrogance or indifference that can settle in for a team that's undefeated sometimes. But clearly there was some things that they got to work on, and they can't afford to give up the ball as many times as they did against the Saskatchewan Huskies. And also they got to make sure that they get that running game going. Braden Stubbs had a difficult time for the most part. He had a couple of runs, but all in all, you look at the situation panoptically against the Huskies, you're right. That was just a stinker. But it was one where the Huskies came in and really asserted dominance. And for Manitoba, I think you come in, you're rested, and now you control your own destiny. You're 5-1. You're atop the standings. I mean, you get one more win, you're assured second place. And if you might not even have to win both of them, but if you do, you can clinch top spot. And suddenly everybody has to go through your barn there. And by the way, online, there are calls to pack Princess Auto Stadium in Winnipeg for that final game against UBC because it's Brian Dobie's last season, and I'm seeing people respond to it. So I'm excited to see what kind of crowd that they can get out there. But hey, you know what? They're number one, 5-1. Took a big loss against Saskatchewan, but they're still the top team. They're still the team that you got to beat and at least get past if you want to get to the Hardy Cup. And if they can assert themselves over the last 2 weeks, it sets up what could be a pretty good playoff round.
Yeah, it should be a very big treat. I forgot that would be the final regular season game of Brian Dobie's historic career here, and that should be a very special one for sure here in a couple of weeks. But before we get uh, too ahead of ourselves, Matt, let's get ahead to this week's matchup. Just to recap, though, quickly, starting with Manitoba of the Canada West standings, Manitoba still sits up at the top, 5-1, UBC at 4-2, the Saskatchewan Huskies at 3-3. And then three teams sit at 2-4, starting with the Alberta Golden Bears, the Regina Rams, and the University of Calgary Dinos. All six teams still remaining in playoff contention. So, Matt, let's get into the action upcoming this week. We made our picks and put them out there in the universe this morning. Going to be another interesting one because all year of these games, well, obviously judging by our records, it's been a interesting and chaotic year on the season. But let's get into the first matchup Friday night, which is the Calgary Dinos traveling to UBC to take on the Thunderbirds, 2-4 versus 4-2. We went with a clean sweep, all four of us picking the University of British Columbia. But this one should be another interesting one, and Calgary's proven to be, I think, a little bit of a pain in the rear of UBC the last couple of years. I think of the week, I think it was maybe 7 last year as well when UBC went out to Calgary. Calgary kind of took it to them and was able to get a victory. So I'm really interested to see how this one goes, especially with as you mentioned there when we were talking about Calgary previously. Matthew Clark has really started to come on and been a really nice piece for them as of late. And I think if they can run the ball, control the clock a little bit, I think could be a recipe to staying close. And who knows what happens if it's a close ball game in the fourth quarter. What are your thoughts on Calgary and UBC this week?
I mean, this is huge for the Calgary Dinos. You would think that they probably got to win if they want to hope to climb back into the playoff pick. So it's definitely must win for them. For UBC, if they can get a win, they get that much closer to a home playoff game, and they'd likely secure one probably. I haven't done the math in my head right now, but they would get pretty close. So I think if you're Calgary, again, your defense has to play well. Right, Nate Boschman, Ball, Taylor Young, those guys, they got to stand up and they got to force some knockdowns or force punt a few times, and they can't let that UBC Thunderbird high octane offense, which can really make big plays, especially through the air. They can't let them get going, and they got to stop Isaiah Knight. That's no easy task. That's easy for you and me to talk about here on the internet, but down on the field, that's a much different story. And Calgary has proven that they can do it, and they do have a good defense. And Ryan Sheehan's a smart mind. I certainly believe that over the games I've seen him coach over the last little while here. So that Calgary team's a good team. For the other side, for UBC, if they can just keep doing what they're doing and they're at home, they should come out with a victory, right? And as long as they don't turn over the ball too much, as long as they play just good disciplined football, get a couple of big plays, UBC is going to probably have things going their way. So I'm interested to see. I know that there's a number of people that are almost wondering if Calgary pull off an upset, because a lot of people thought, when they went up against Alberta, we talked about it, I think. How does Calgary beat a good Alberta team? Well, they came out there and did it, right? So Calgary absolutely has a chance if their defense plays well and if they don't turn over the ball against a good UBC team that's rising, and that'll be a fun one out in Vancouver.
Yes, it will. And I believe last matchup was a close one. I think it was maybe the 32-30 game earlier in the season. I'm just happy, Matt, at least one team in BC, one football team in BC is playing well right now, because the BC Lions sure aren't that. That is
Yeah.
a story.
Yeah.
That's a story for another day, Matt, because
Yeah.
we have to hash that on the weekly show and on a preview and post game on a
Yeah.
weekly basis. So that's a discussion for tomorrow night.
There you go.
But hopefully UBC is able to get the victory and continue their winning ways. But I'm interested to see. I think Calgary will have a puncher's chance in this one, and we'll be right there in the end of this game. Anyway, so Regina and Saskatchewan, as called by one Darren Dupont and Matt Young this weekend. This should be a very interesting one and a very thrilling game. What are your thoughts on this one, Matt?
Well, this is going to be a fun one, and I think you know what? When you look at the Saskatchewan Huskies, it's can their offense maintain their ability to move the football like they did against the Manitoba Bisons, and sort of that great second half performance. Remember, they were down, I believe it was 19 against Alberta in the second half, and the Huskies came back. So can Anton Amadroud and Daniel Weeb and Jesse Coons and Riker Frank, can they keep it going? On the other side for the Regina Rams, can Deshaun Mims and Nicholas Sirleaf and Noah Pelche and Marshall Erickson, can they keep it going? And that's going to be it's shaping up to be a nice day for football out in Saskatoon on Saturday. So you won't have anything like snow or gale force winds or anything like that. So it's a chance for two offenses to really show off their stuff, especially going through the air. And then on the other side, I'm interested to see how Cameron Ma and Sombach and those guys for the Regina Rams, what can they do against the high-powered Saskatchewan attack? And on the other side, you got Catley Joseph and Seth Hundaby for Saskatchewan. They might get a couple of guys back on the front four on defensive line. They also got Reese Cack out there. What can they do as well? And for these two teams, always when they play each other, especially in Saskatoon, you can throw away the records. It doesn't matter if they're 0-6 or 6-0. They're going to play each other tough, and that's going to be a fun one. And I'm excited. I got the Saskatchewan Huskies in this one only because they're surging. They've played so well for the last, I would say, 6 quarters of football. Now there's been a bye week in there, right? So we'll see what that does as far as getting guys back and rest for both sides. I have the Huskies in this one, but would it surprise me if the Rams came to victory? Not this season, because this season nothing surprises me anymore.
At this point, for sure. I think the Saskatchewan Huskies are going to feel a type of way about losing that first matchup, and obviously a close one. But as you mentioned, with that rivalry, I believe it's in Saskatchewan. It is. So I think the Huskies will be ready to go from opening kickoff and eager to take it to their province rival. And as you mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if Regina was able to keep it close and come out on top. But I will go with Saskatchewan this week. It was interesting to see, actually. Connor O'Neill from CFP actually went with Regina Rams, and it's not I don't think a shocking pick by any means, because of Regina and how they've looked all season, especially on both sides. I think they're a strong unit and a strong team, more so than one or two superstars. I think they have a lot of good players on that team that make them an overall strong team.
Oh,
You were mentioning
they
it.
absolutely do. Mark McConkey absolutely doesn't. Like I say, there's a bunch of times this year if they don't, commit some turnovers in the fourth quarter, this
Yeah.
is a team that probably could have beaten the UBC Thunderbirds. So I mean, I wrestled with it too because I see these teams so often in Saskatchewan. I live here, right? And I was down at Mosaic Stadium last week and did a couple of games here at Saskatoon. I've seen both these teams play, and either one of them can win, especially when the conditions are right. So I mean, I went with the Huskies only because I see them really surging right now. But that Mark McConkey coach team's a well coached team, and it'll be fun out here in Saskatoon on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I went with the Saskatchewan Huskies for the simple sake that they have Riker Frank and Daniel Weeb. I think arguably the two best players in this game, and I think they'll make an impact on Saturday. You're mentioning a few of the names on defense for the Regina Rams. I have to throw one in. That's one of my favorites. Chopper Hippie. Love
Chopper
that
Hippie,
name.
absolutely, yep,
When I hear that
yeah.
one on the call, that one always fires me up. I believe he's actually a BC boy, if I'm not actually mistaken, as well. I could
I
be
think so. Yeah, I
I
think
could be
I
wrong
want
on
to
that,
say he's
but
from Abbotsford, but I
I
can just
could
double
be
check right here. Yeah.
I could be wrong,
Um,
but I always get fired up when I hear Chopper Hippie. I'm not too sure if he's a linebacker, defensive lineman, but you hear him on the call from time to time, that's for sure.
no, he's
And
he's he's a hometown Lloydminster, Saskatchewan. He's a Saskatchewan boy.
okay, Saskatchewan boy,
There you
but
go.
must have been mistaken on that one. Just love the name of hearing that Chopper Hippie on the call when you're tuning into Regina Rams game. So, lastly, this week we have another intriguing matchup with Manitoba traveling to Alberta. Alberta has been up and down all season. I think this is another big opportunity for them to still prove to everybody that they are one of the top teams in Canada West still. They can get to 3-4, knock Manitoba down, make things interesting for UBC that much more in the last week of the regular season, and then have every opportunity for them to keep climbing up the standings in their last regular season finale as well. What are your thoughts on Manitoba and Alberta?
Well, I mean, this is a big opportunity for the Manitoba Bisons, simply because they come in at 5-1 and they're facing an Alberta team and again, I haven't seen the depth chart yet, so I'm not sure exactly if
Eli.
assuming Eli Hetlinger is not going to start, it's going to be Caleb Breck. And that's not no disrespect to Caleb Breck, right? He's a good quarterback and actually played very
Sorry, Matt.
well.
Do we know what the injury is to Eli?
I don't have it for sure. I just know that against Saskatchewan,
It
he
was a
on
lower
the
body,
second
right?
last
Because he he
play,
he was kind of like limping off the field or whatever, I believe.
it difficult to say at this point. I don't know for sure if it's lower body. My color commentator at the time, Bryce McCall, thought that he had maybe hurt his shoulder. So I don't have the exact injury on that one. Just know that he didn't play last week, and not sure if he's going to play this week. And if he doesn't, if it's Caleb Breck, I mean, I had no disrespect to him. He's a great quarterback. But the Manitoba Bisons in there and come out with a victory and move proof to 6-1. They clinch a home playoff game and would likely clinch first place, depending on how the math kind of shakes down with UBC, right? So this is an opportunity for the Manitoba Bisons. On the other side, they're facing a very hungry Alberta team that believes, and rightly so, that they're better than their record shows right now, and that there's a couple of games that they should have won. And I think back to that game against Saskatchewan, up by 19 in the second half, and the Huskies come all the way back. And credit to the Huskies, Scott Flory knows how to get a team fired up, especially when they're down. He's a great coach, but so is Chris Morris, and I think that Alberta looked at one that slipped away there. The Huskies winning a close battle, 33-30 in that one, and I think for the Alberta Golden Bears, look, they got nothing to lose at this point. I don't know if that they can afford to fall to 2-5. They got to get Matthew Peterson going. Matthew Peterson has got to carry the rock, and if they can get him, a 100-yard game, limit the turnovers, no interceptions, that Alberta team has a chance. For the Manitoba Bisons, again, it's the bye week that came at a great time for them. And they're going to be well rested for this one, obviously, as will Alberta. Jackson Tashinsky and company are going to probably go over the game film and figure out what went wrong against Saskatchewan. So I have the Manitoba Bisons again, just because of the quarterbacking situation. And again, that's no disrespect to Cade LeBrec. I've seen Cade LeBrec play, and he can move the ball. And you can bet that he's going to want to show people he deserves to sort of be at the helm and take control of a team. And I believe he can. But with Jackson Dushinski, if Manitoba has all their weapons going, and if that defense for Manitoba holds up, I mean, it's 42 points this season. I was surprised. That Manitoba defense has been pretty good all year. In fact, even after that performance against the Saskatchewan Huskies, where they lost 42-24, they've still allowed the fewest points against this season. That's how good that defense had been through the first 5 games of the season. So I have Manitoba in this one. Would it surprise me if Alberta wins? It would not at all, because I know that Alberta team's a good team. That offensive line is an experienced offensive line, and when they get Matthew Peterson going, look out. And if they do, I think it could cause problems for the Manitoba Bisons. But again, I got Manitoba by a hair. I still think there's something special going on in Winnipeg with Brian Dobie's last season. And we'll see if the Buffalo roam atop Canada West after this week.
Yes, and I think I agree with kind of all what you just said there. Unfortunately for Alberta, I think they need, I believe of what you nicknamed, they need the Book of Eli, Matt.
The Book of Eli. And he's not, he's likely not going to be there. A guy that stepped up for Alberta is Eric Torium, number 85.
85,
he's done a good job, and he's really stepped up these last 2 games, and he's good. And we'll see what he can do as well.
A bigger body type receiver too. That's nice. Kind of some of those contested catches. He's been a very exciting player to watch all season.
Absolutely,
in the last few weeks here. But I agree with you. I think there's something special going on in Manitoba. I think that defense is going to be very ticked off coming into this one, giving up the 42 points, wanting to prove that, it's no surprise coming into this one. Alberta's on deck. I think it's not a shocker to say that you coming into that week, you're preparing for Matthew Peterson and then everybody else. So I would think that they're, preparing for, Matthew Peterson and really looking forward to that test of, trying to contain him. I believe he's only had, I think it was 63 yards there before the bye week. So I would think they're going to want to get him going, but they're going to probably, from a Manitoba perspective, keep him a little bit quieter. So I too have Manitoba. I think with offensively and defensively, they're just a really good team overall, and we'll be able to get it done and return to the win column. So, Matt, that'll kind of conclude the show here tonight. You were obviously on the call Saturday, so I want to wish you the best of luck. Have fun. Hopefully it is a great game for you guys. But any final thoughts, Matt, before we get out of here for another Canada West football show?
You know what? I encourage people to watch. You know what? They're putting together, great production for these games, and we've seen some great college football. And there's even some scouts down south that are starting to take notice about what we have up here in Canada. I mean, I think some players that absolutely in all of these games you're going to see them in the CFL, and I think it's so fun to see some of these guys come up through the ranks before they reach the pro ranks. So I encourage everybody to watch. I think it's going to be fun. Let's get it on. I'm excited because this is where the rubber meets the road. Like I said, the leaves are changing color, and this is football weather. And the other thing I wanted to say, at Prairie Football Conference, I'm actually doing a lot of games this weekend. I'll be in the booth for that one. I got 2 Saskatchewan Huskies hockey games that I'll be doing, and then also
are you doing the Tops and Thunder?
I'm doing the Tops and Thunder. I was going to say that too. Hilltops and Regina Thunder on Sunday for the PFC Championship, and that's going to be a slog as well. So you got 2 big games. You got the Huskies taking on the Rams. You got the Hilltops taking on the Thunder for Saskatchewan football fans out there. It doesn't get any better than that. So I'll be in the booth doing that game, and I got a couple of Husky hockey games. So busy weekend for me, but folks, take an opportunity and watch some of these young guys, because you're going to see a couple of them in the pro ranks. There's a couple of guys for the Hilltops that I think are absolutely going to get some invites to some CFL mini camps, and some guys with the Huskies as well. So, and the Rams for sure, and the Regina Thunder. So there's a lot of great football to go around, and it'll be a really fun weekend, and pleasure to come up and talk U Sports or any kind of football with you, Cole. It's always fun, and let's get it on this weekend starting Friday night.
Yes, love the little CJFL plug in there, Matt. Definitely will be keeping my eye on that matchup. The Tops are the standard in the CJFL, being a CJFL alumni playing for the Vancouver Island Raiders out here. Obviously heard about their storied franchise and everything they've been a part of, and I think they continue to add to their greatness on Saturday. And hopefully, that rivalry, Regina, I know they're a tough program as well and a formidable program. It'll give them everything they got. But if I was a betting man on CJFL, I think I know where to put my money just on the standard they've set in Canadian junior football. They are a great program, and just easy to root for greatness of the what they built there in Saskatoon. So love to hear that, Matt. Good luck on the call. Hopefully, they're two exciting ones, and the hockey games are as well. Thank you for joining us as always, and we will see you guys next week on the Canada West Football Show.
See you next week.